The alien invasion of Earth lasted just 48 hours. Their perfect bioweapon spread across the globe, bringing humanity to its knees. But what they didn't understand, what no calculation in their empire could predict, was that our suffering wasn't the end. Within a single day, the cure we forged would turn their victory into their downfall. Before we begin, if you enjoy these original long-form HFY stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps me bring more of these to you. Now, let's begin. The first sign was not the ships, nor the thunder of their engines, nor even the shadows blotting out the sun. It was the silence, on a planet of constant noise, of cities alive with traffic, of skies crisscrossed with aircraft, of people shouting into phones and radios. The silence was what struck deepest. The world held its breath as something vast and merciless descended from the heavens. The fleets came in layered formations, black silhouettes against the daylight. Hundreds of vessels, their hulls gleaming with alien alloys, slid into orbit as if they owned the skies already. Some hung motionless in the upper atmosphere, their edges glowing with atmospheric burn. Others dropped lower, slow and deliberate, like predators stalking weakened prey. Humanity had imagined such moments in fiction, but fiction had always made it spectacular. This was something colder, clinical. There was no negotiation, no broadcasted ultimatum, no chance for humanity to surrender. The first strike came like a whisper of death, drifting down across the continents. A rain of invisible spores fell from the alien carriers, dispersing on the winds, inhaled by lungs across every nation. It was not fire and fury, not bombs cratering cities. It was worse. It was subtle. It was clean. A single bioweapon, engineered to infiltrate humanity at its most fragile level. Breath itself. At first it was only a cough. One man on a train leaned forward, hacking into his sleeve. A child in a classroom wiped her nose. An old woman in a market sneezed. Tiny moments scattered across the globe, unremarkable in their ordinariness. But they multiplied. They spread. Within hours, it was everywhere. The aliens hovered above, their fleets watching Earth with the cold detachment of surgeons observing a patient go under. To them, it was already over. A war won without a battle. They had perfected this weapon across other species, refining it over decades until resistance was mathematically impossible. Humanity, with its chaotic biology and endless flaws, would fall faster than most. But the view from the ground was different. Hospitals swelled with the sick. Streets emptied as fever gripped millions. Entire cities seemed to collapse into beds, homes, and makeshift clinics. Governments broadcast emergency alerts that blended into background noise. Every channel, every screen showing the same desperate words. Stay inside. Quarantine if you can. Help is coming. Yet humanity's armies could not fight fever with tanks. Their weapons stood silent while the enemy's victory was written in coughs and sweat. The aliens waited for the silence to become final, for the voices of a species to dim into nothing, for the coughs to turn into stillness. They were certain it would come. And on the second day, when Earth seemed to convulse in fever and weakness, the alien commanders celebrated. They had ended a civilization in 48 hours without firing a single shot. But they were wrong. They mistook misery for defeat. They mistook coughing for surrender. They mistook humanity's suffering for death. And they had no idea what was about to rise from those hospital beds and fevered nights. Humanity was not done. The invasion did not sound like war. It did not echo with artillery or the rumble of tanks. It sounded like coughing. The world shook not with explosions, but with waves of sneezes and wheezing breaths. Entire neighborhoods seemed to echo with the sound of illness, a chorus of misery that stretched across nations. Families huddled in their homes, parents shivering under blankets while children whimpered with fevers. Hospitals, already strained, became overflowing islands of sickness. Stretchers lined hallways, parking lots filled with tents. Doctors and nurses wore masks that did little to protect them from the onslaught. And through it all, the aliens watched. Their fleets remained silent in orbit, as if they were already finished with Earth. Their work was done. They had unleashed the storm, and now all that was left was to let it burn itself out. Governments tried to project control, but there was little to say. Leaders appeared on broadcasts, pale and hoarse themselves, declaring quarantines and curfews while coughing between sentences. Emergency alerts shrieked from phones and radios, but they all sounded the same. Stay home, endure, wait. Humanity had no cure, no weapon, no strategy that mattered against something invisible that moved with every breath. Yet even as billions fell sick, humanity did not die. It was suffering on a scale the world had never known, yes. Trains sat empty, factories fell silent, armies stayed in barracks while their soldiers wheezed into tissues. The planet seemed to grind to a halt, but the death toll was not what the aliens expected. Their weapon had been designed to collapse civilizations in days, to cut down populations before they had time to adapt. But the humans endured. Pale, fevered, drenched in sweat, they endured. People dragged themselves from bed to care for family. Neighbors left food on doorsteps despite their own weakness. Doctors collapsed at their posts only to be replaced by others just as sick but unwilling to stop. The aliens mistook this for delay. They believed humanity was only prolonging the inevitable. In their calculations, Earth's resilience was noise in the data, not a threat. They watched the suffering below with detached satisfaction, already turning their eyes toward which planet would be next to fall. But inside the chaos of overwhelmed hospitals and fever-ridden cities, something was happening. Scientists, coughing into masks and shivering at lab benches, kept working. They mapped the invaders' virus, watching how it tore through cells, how it spread, how it shifted. And in that shifting, they found something unexpected. The weapon was not perfect, not against humanity. It changed too quickly, bounced too erratically between bodies, twisted in ways the aliens hadn't anticipated. Our biology was too messy, too wild. What was supposed to be surgical precision became a storm of unpredictable mutations. And buried in that storm was a glimmer of opportunity. The aliens celebrated. Humanity coughed. And in that coughing, the seeds of their downfall were already being sown. High above Earth, the alien fleet glittered like a crown of fireflies against the dark canvas of space. Their ships were not built for ground combat. They had never intended to wage war in the human sense. They were laboratories, biocrafters, weapons platforms designed not for bombs and bullets, but for plagues. And from their vantage, Earth already looked conquered. Inside the flagship, a cathedral of glass and bone, alive with humming conduits and shimmering air, the alien commanders gathered. They were tall, angular things, their forms wrapped in living armor that pulsed faintly with their own biotech. They did not roar or cheer as humans might after victory. Their celebrations were colder, ceremonial, a silent acknowledgement of inevitability fulfilled. To them, this was not war. This was cleansing. One commander raised its elongated hands, its voice resonating through the chamber like wind through hollow pipes. The humans will not rise. They are consumed. Their resistance is only noise before silence. Others bowed their heads in solemn pride. For generations, these invaders had perfected their craft, bioweapons tailored to dissect civilizations without wasting resources on prolonged conflict. Planets fell in weeks, sometimes days. The spoils were gathered clean, the survivors, if any, reduced to husks unworthy of notice, and yet Earth had made them sweat. Reports still trickled in from their observers. Cities alive with flickering lights, aircraft still patrolling, militaries still organized, even if weakened. Billions ill, yes, but not billions dead. It was an aberration in the expected curve, a jagged line on what should have been a smooth descent into extinction. The alien leaders dismissed the anomaly. "They are fragile," one hissed, "but stubborn. Their fire will gutter soon enough. The pattern holds true." Still, they decided to mark the occasion. Across the fleet, they held rituals of triumph. Bioluminescent fires crackled in chambers of bone. Chants echoed through the living walls of their ships, praises to their craft, to the brilliance of wielding disease as a blade. They called themselves gods not of war, but of endings. And Earth, coughing and feverish below, was their latest altar. What they did not know, what they could not imagine, was that humanity was already rewriting the script. In underground labs and makeshift hospital wards, in university basements and military bunkers, scientists were piecing together something no alien mind had anticipated. The virus was not just a weapon, it was a mirror, showing the differences between their biology and ours. And in those differences lay a weakness. Humanity was too busy suffering to celebrate. The aliens were too busy celebrating to see the danger. And in that blindness, the countdown to their own destruction had already begun. The world was shivering, wrapped in blankets of fever and misery. Streets that once pulsed with traffic now echoed with coughs. Hospitals overflowed, stadiums had become infirmaries, and even the healthiest walked as if underwater, slowed by the relentless drag of sickness. And yet, in the midst of all that weakness, something remarkable was happening. Doctors, nurses, and researchers refused to collapse. Entire nations, though brought to their knees, funneled every ounce of energy into study. Samples of the alien-engineered plague were rushed into laboratories, sometimes carried by scientists still burning with fever. They wiped sweat from their brows, steadied trembling hands, and leaned over microscopes with bloodshot eyes. The plague was brutal, but it wasn't perfect. At first, it looked unstoppable, weaving through immune systems like a blade through silk. But under human eyes, the cracks began to show. The virus was too complex, too elegant, too alien. Its efficiency was tuned to devastate, yet it left strange byproducts inside human cells, waste materials the invaders hadn't accounted for. In one bunker lab beneath a collapsed university, a team of graduate students stumbled upon something extraordinary. The virus wasn't just infecting, it was triggering unexpected immune responses, rapid adaptations that no alien biology could have anticipated. White blood cells were mutating at speed, producing proteins never seen before. It was as if humanity's immune system had taken the weapon and started to reshape it. Word spread in encrypted messages, passed between exhausted researchers across continents. A pattern emerged. The plague wasn't universally fatal. It was self-limiting, nasty, crippling, miserable, but survivable for most. Humanity wasn't just weathering it, it was learning from it. And then came the leap. A virologist in Geneva, coughing into her mask, whispered through a cracked voice, "We can turn it back on them." She wasn't alone. Across the globe, in New York, in Lagos, in Tokyo, in hidden bases and candlelit labs, others were drawing the same conclusion. If humanity could harness the altered proteins, if they could stabilize the waste the virus left behind, it could be weaponized again, not against people, but against the aliens who had birthed it. The sickness that brought Earth to its knees could be forged into a blade sharper than anything the invaders had prepared for. The idea was wild, dangerous, untested, but so was humanity itself. And as the aliens sang songs of victory in their bone-forged halls, Earth's scientists worked feverishly, racing against collapsing lungs and failing hearts, crafting a cure not only to save humanity, but to turn the plague into a plague for its makers. The clock was ticking. The invasion had lasted 48 hours. The cure was already halfway born. The invaders thought Earth's silence was proof of defeat. Cities smoldered, skies hung gray with ash, and human broadcasts had all but ceased. To them, it meant conquest was complete. To us, it was the cover we needed. Beneath the ruins of shattered skyscrapers and in the dim hum of underground bunkers, humanity was not idle. Scientists, medics, and soldiers fused into a single machine of desperation. Every breath spent coughing was balanced by hands working on centrifuges. Every tear shed in fever was matched by data scribbled into notebooks. The virus had attacked us with merciless precision, but in its complexity, it had revealed its arrogance. It didn't just infect, it interacted. It left residues, opened doors, lit up pathways in our immune system that should have taken millennia to evolve. The aliens had given us, unintentionally, a biological fast-forward button, and humanity was pressing it hard. A pattern emerged. In blood samples from survivors, immune cells carried fragments of the plague altered beyond recognition. Where the alien design had sought domination, the human body had twisted it, corrupted it, reshaped it into something toxic. Not to us, but to anything with the alien's biochemistry. What had begun as a plague of suffering had become a forge of resilience. The Geneva team, barely able to stand upright, managed to sequence the altered proteins. Their eyes widened as they watched the strands spiral across monitors. To alien physiology, this wasn't medicine. It was death. And then the connection clicked. Humans could exhale it. Tiny traces lingered in sweat, in breath, in the droplets of a cough. Survivors weren't just immune, they were carriers of something new. A plague not meant for humanity, but tailor-made by accident for the invaders themselves. The fever had made us contagious. To them, all it needed was refinement, stabilization, a way to ensure it would spread cleanly. Not just through blood, but through air, through contact, through every means the aliens had once weaponized against us. Some called it a cure. Others called it vengeance. Most didn't call it anything at all. They just worked, hands shaking, lungs rattling, because time was running out. Above the atmosphere, the alien fleet drifted in triumph, preparing their formal declaration of conquest. They didn't know that their greatest weapon had already been stolen, twisted, and sharpened into a dagger aimed at their own throats. Earth had one last card to play, and it was already in our bloodstream. The first trial was not born from choice, but from accident. In the ruins of São Paulo, a patrol stumbled across an alien reconnaissance drone. It was sleek, insectoid, its hull shimmering like oil under the choking haze of the ruined city. Normally, encounters ended in slaughter, but this time, something different happened. The drone released a pulse, a warning flare, and one of the humans coughed. Not a weapon, not even intentional, just a rasping, fevered cough. The droplets hung in the humid air, the drone's sensors flickered, then went dead. The machine collapsed in on itself, metal twisting as though corroded by acid. The patrol didn't understand at first. They thought it was luck. But when a second alien unit fell, and then a third, each time in the presence of fevered survivors, the truth spread faster than the sickness itself. The plague had turned. Back in the bunkers, the reports arrived like whispers from a ghost. Aliens faltering at checkpoints, machines shutting down when exposed to infected breath, bio-armor peeling away as if it were dissolving. What had once been a weapon to break us had become the very thing unraveling them. The Geneva team pushed harder. They condensed the altered proteins into aerosol form, stabilizing the strain, amplifying it. The first controlled release was in a sealed chamber with a captured alien soldier. The creature stood tall, armored in its natural carapace, its mandibles clacking in defiance. To them, humans were fragile things, barely worth notice. It did not flinch when the gas hissed into the chamber. At first, nothing. Then its limbs stiffened. The glossy armor cracked. Its secondary eyes bled milky fluid. Within minutes, it collapsed against the glass, its body spasming until it went still. The room of scientists, soldiers, and medics sat in silence. The implications pressed down heavier than the air itself. For the first time in 48 hours, they weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. And word spread fast. Across continents, across shattered cities, humans whispered it in the dark. We had found the cure, but this was no medicine. This was a mirror turned back at the invaders, and once unleashed, there would be no controlling it. For humanity, it was survival. For the aliens, it would be extinction. The decision came at dawn, though dawn no longer looked like dawn. The skies were veiled with soot and smoke, the sun reduced to a dull ember. Yet under that broken sky, humanity gathered for its first true strike. In what was left of Warsaw, a pocket of survivors prepared the release. They weren't soldiers in the old sense. Some were fevered refugees clutching rifles too heavy for their frames. Others were medics whose hands still shook from the tremors of illness. A handful were military officers, their uniforms tattered, their eyes hollow, but burning with intent. They had something the aliens didn't: the cure, the weapon, the sickness that healed us but damned them. Cylinders filled with aerosolized strain were strapped to battered drones, to jury-rigged mortars, even to weather balloons scavenged from abandoned research stations. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't polished, it was human. When the alien patrol ship descended, its hull gleaming like obsidian, the city seemed to hold its breath. Columns of armored creatures marched through the streets, their weapons crackling with energy. They expected no resistance. They expected compliance. The survivors released hell instead. The first drones buzzed overhead, stuttering from faulty motors, and burst open above the marching column. A faint mist drifted downward, so light it might have been mistaken for morning fog. The aliens looked up, unbothered. They did not flinch from the humans charging from the rubble. Their arrogance was absolute, until the first of them stumbled. Its steps faltered, its claws scraping the ground. Another fell to one knee, its breathing ragged, their armor cracked, bubbling as though corroded from within. Screeches split the air as ranks collapsed in chaos. Weapons discharged wildly, some into the ground, others into the sky, as their bodies betrayed them. The humans kept advancing, their own coughing ragged but steady. The sickness burned in their chests, but it no longer weakened them. It fueled them. For every alien that fell, a human survivor rose taller, steadier, defiant. By noon, the patrol ship lay abandoned. Its hatches hung open, its crew dead within. For the first time in the invasion, an alien vessel was taken not by technology, not by firepower, but by biology, by the very air the humans exhaled. And the message carried across the resistance. The invaders could bleed. The invaders could fall. But victory brought no cheers, not yet. Everyone knew what came next. The aliens would notice. They would not retreat. They would retaliate. The plague had become our weapon. Now it had to become our war. The news of Warsaw spread like lightning through whispers and broken radio signals. Across bunkers, ruins, and resistance dens, the word echoed, "We struck back." For a heartbeat, hope returned to a starving world. The aliens answered that hope with fire. Hours after the patrol ship was taken, the horizon burned. Great leviathans of steel descended from orbit, their hulls blotting out what was left of the sun. They didn't march this time. They didn't need to. Their vengeance rained from above. Energy lances cut through entire districts, turning stone and flesh into glass. The air screamed with the sound of collapsing towers. In seconds, whole blocks of survivors vanished, erased without even the dignity of a grave. The aliens had learned. No more arrogance, no more slow patrols. They came with fury now, precision and scale that humans could not match. Yet even under that firestorm, the sickness traveled. The mist that lingered in the ruins of Warsaw clung to the wind, invisible, patient. The soldiers who disembarked from the Leviathans coughed within minutes. Their armored ranks staggered as the plague took hold. For every human life consumed by fire, an alien life withered in silence. But the cost was unbearable. In the underground tunnels of the city, survivors watched the sky collapse on itself. Mothers clutched children as walls shook from the bombardment. Fathers pressed their foreheads against rifles, knowing they could do nothing but wait. Above ground, flames licked the streets where the mist still hung. It was not only a battlefield now, it was a graveyard. And yet, amid the devastation, something stirred. Resistance leaders realized the truth. They could not outgun the invaders. They could not outfly them. But if they could survive the storm, if they could endure long enough, the plague would do the fighting for them. As alien ships withdrew, leaving smoking craters where cities once stood, the battlefield looked strangely balanced. Humanity crawled out from beneath rubble, coughing and bloodied but alive. Alien corpses lay twisted among the ruins, their towering frames riddled with lesions and rot. The invasion was no longer a slaughter. It was a war of attrition, and the clock had begun to turn against the invaders. The invasion was meant to be swift. In 48 hours, Earth was to be broken. The aliens had not planned for a war, but what they received was not just a war, it was a reversal. In the shattered command centers of Washington, Berlin, and Tokyo, resistance leaders pieced together scraps of communication. For the first time since the invasion began, different continents spoke with one another again, their words jagged with static but carrying a single purpose: weaponize the plague everywhere. In underground labs, volunteers stepped forward, fever-ridden but unafraid, offering their blood as the raw material for humanity's new arsenal. From that blood, scientists distilled clouds of altered proteins, aerosolized them into crude canisters, and shipped them across continents through secret tunnels, broken rail lines, and even couriers who carried death in their lungs. On the battlefields, humans no longer fired bullets first. They released air. Rusty pipes hissed. Grenades cracked open not with fire, but with mist. Soldiers who had been coughing on cots were now marched deliberately into alien staging grounds, their every breath a weapon. At first, the aliens laughed, or whatever their clicking equivalent was. To them, humans were always weak, dripping with fluids, shaking with fevers. But the laughter stopped when entire battalions collapsed within hours, their mighty frames convulsing in the dirt, their armor buckling as organs liquefied from within. For every city block lost to orbital fire, 1,000 alien lungs filled with poison. For every human grave dug in the rubble, a dozen alien corpses fell unburied in the streets. The invaders had underestimated humanity's greatest trait: not our strength, not our weapons, but our refusal to die quietly. We had taken sickness, something meant to break us, and sharpened it into a blade. By the 10th day, the aliens' precision had crumbled. Patrols that once moved with machine-like order staggered through streets, hacking and bleeding, their weapons slipping from trembling claws. Their once perfect armor was streaked with decay. For the first time, human scouts reported something astonishing. The aliens were retreating. Not a feigned maneuver, not a strategic repositioning. A true retreat. They were leaving the cities, abandoning occupied strongholds, pulling back toward their orbital ships. And humanity, bloodied and coughing, chased them. The tide had turned. The hunters had become the hunted. Above Earth, the alien fleets had always been untouchable. Their ships hung like gods in the sky, colossal silhouettes blotting out stars. From their vantage, they had rained fire without consequence, never expecting that death could climb so high. But the sickness was patient, and it had already boarded their vessels. Wounded soldiers dragged back aboard their transports, coughing and bleeding, unknowingly carried the plague into the heart of the invasion force. Medics in sterile suits tried to quarantine them, but it was useless. The air systems recycled death faster than any firewall could contain. Within days, entire decks of battleships went silent. First the engineers, then the pilots, then the officers themselves. Control rooms that once pulsed with perfect alien order now echoed with retching and collapse. Back on Earth, survivors noticed something strange. The sky no longer burned each night. The daily bombardments ceased. The thunder of orbital cannons went quiet. It was as if the heavens themselves were sick. In bunkers, the whispers began again. They're dying up there. Desperate, the aliens tried to seal themselves off, shutting down troop movements, cutting all but the most essential communications. But the sickness didn't respect protocols. It seeped through vents, through shared rations, through the very air they breathed. The fleet above Earth became a floating tomb. And with every alien death, humanity rose higher. Resistance fighters began launching scavenged rockets and jury-rigged drones skyward, carrying vials of infected blood, hoping to pierce hulls and spread the contagion further. Many were shot down, a few connected. Each successful strike turned another ship into a coffin. The aliens had brought war to Earth in 48 hours, but within 24 more, their invasion force teetered on the brink of collapse, not from bullets, not from bombs, but from humanity's most ancient curse. Down in the ruins, survivors crawled from hiding. For the first time, children played in the ash without fear of sudden fire. Fighters stood tall on broken highways, looking skyward not with dread, but with grim satisfaction. The war was no longer about survival. It was about watching the invaders die. And yet, in the silence that followed, one terrifying thought lingered. If the plague could destroy them so completely, what would it do if it ever came back to us? The sky was quieter than it had ever been. No orbital strikes, no thunder of descending craft. Just silence, broken only by the hiss of wind through hollowed-out cities. And then, one night, a signal, across every frequency. Civilian radios, military bands, even hijacked television channels, the transmission came. It wasn't human. It was the invaders. The image flickered, distorted by static, but the sight was unmistakable, one of their commanders. Its armor, once polished like liquid metal, was smeared with fluids. Its many limbs shook violently, tremors racing through a body riddled with fever. Its mandibles clicked in broken rhythm, translating into a fractured voice across Earth's receivers. Humans, your world, unclean. The alien coughed mid-sentence, a wet, gurgling sound. Its translator struggled to keep up, glitching as the commander tried again. "Cease this plague, cure us, we will—" Another convulsion cut it short. Black fluid splattered across its console. In the background, other aliens stumbled, collapsed, their silhouettes writhing in chaos. Sirens wailed. Lights flickered. It was no broadcast of strength. It was a plea. For the first time, the invaders were begging. But there was no answer from Earth. No council convened to negotiate. No emissaries sent upward. Humanity had nothing to give them but silence. After all, what cure could be offered when the sickness itself was survival? The broadcast dragged on, the commander attempting again and again to bargain, its words slipping further into madness, promises of withdrawal, of reparations, of knowledge. But each promise dissolved into choking, each threat into a whisper. And then, after one final wheeze, the screen went dark. The last broadcast of the invasion had not been a declaration of power. It had been a death rattle. On Earth, survivors looked at one another in stunned silence. For generations, humans had imagined first contact as something awe-inspiring, terrifying, or beautiful. No one had ever pictured it ending like this, with the enemy begging for mercy that would never come. The aliens had sought to cleanse Earth in 48 hours, but in the end, it was they who vanished in less time than it takes a fever to break. The war ended not with parades, not with flags raised over cities, not even with a battle. It ended with silence. By the dawn of the 48th hour, the great alien warships that had darkened Earth's skies were drifting husks. Some burned up in the atmosphere, their flames streaking across the night like falling stars. Others hung motionless in orbit, filled with nothing but corpses. Their armies were gone. Their commanders were gone. Their empire's reach had snapped against the smallest, most ordinary thing humanity carried, a virus wrapped in sneezes, coughs, and runny noses. But Earth did not celebrate. The streets were still graveyards. Cities still smoldered. Families still searched rubble for names that would never answer back. Humanity had survived, yes, but survival carried a shadow. The cure that saved the planet was not medicine. It was not strategy. It was something darker, something that made the survivors shiver when they thought too long about it. We hadn't beaten the invaders with weapons. We hadn't beaten them with brilliance. We had beaten them with our sickness. For some, it felt like justice. For others, like guilt. And in the hushed days after, as radios crackled with the first whispers of rebuilding, one truth settled heavy on every heart. If the aliens had been watching us before, others would surely be watching now. And when they came, they would know. Humanity carried something no shield could stop, no army could endure. Something we had never meant to wield but had turned into the deadliest weapon of all. The invasion lasted 48 hours. The cure took 24. And when the ashes cleared, only humans remained to tell the story. If you made it this far, you're one of the survivors. Drop a comment below. What do you think? Was this victory humanity's greatest strength or our darkest curse? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who loves sci-fi twists. Until next time, stay human.